This video is about compound interest. Compound interest is studying how money grows over time. So imagine that you are going to start with $100. If you had $100 and someone was going to pay you 10% interest after 1 year, what would happen? Well, you might think about it this way. If your time was 0, you'd have $1,000. After 1 year, you'd have your $1,000 plus you'd have 10% of that. What's 10% of that? It's 0.1 times 1,000, which is really 100, right? So you'd have a total of $1,100 after 1 year. Well, we can actually abbreviate this, write it more simply, because both of these terms have 1,000. Another way to write that would be 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1. So you can see that this, if you were punching it into a calculator, might be simpler because here you have to punch 6 zeros, here you only have to punch 3 zeros, and we're always looking for something a little bit simpler. So this is how you would do it one time. How would you do it if you were going to get 10% interest the second year? Well, here's the catch. The second year, you wouldn't be getting interest on $1,000 because you have $1,100. So you'd get your $1,100 back, plus you'd get 0.1 times $1,100. That would be ending you with $1,210 because you're getting interest on your interest. And this is an interesting phenomenon over time, but notice what happens if we write it the way we were talking about up here. You can write this as 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1. You can write this as 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1. That'll get you your 1,100. And then multiply it by that again. That'll get you your 1,210. The nice thing about this pattern is it's really easy to keep going. So what's 3? I don't have to write something different. I just change the number of times I'm multiplying the entire thing times 1 plus the interest rate. If you want to ask, hey, what would you have if you had 10% interest? This is 10% interest. We would say compounded annually, compounded once a year. After 40 years, that would be equal to 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1, or 1.1, to the 40th power. Now, often, interest is not compounded annually. When you see something that advertises an APR, annual percentage rate, they're talking about annual compounding. But there are other things. For instance, mortgages are often compounded monthly. Well, what's that mean? If it's 5% interest compounded monthly, that doesn't mean they charge you 5% every month. That means that they charge you 1/12 of the entire interest every month. So how would that look? Well, if you'd borrowed $40,000 to buy a house, and let's say, for instance, there's no payments, you don't have to make any payments for the first month. So what are they going to do? They're charging you 5% interest that month. So they take the 5% interest, this was 10% interest, right? 10% is 0.10, 5% is 0.05. They divide it by 12. That's how much interest they charge you the first month. Well, let's imagine that you had no payments for the first month, but they just charge you interest. That's what they do the first time. The second time, same thing. You'd have a squared, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, right? Well, so what's going to happen here is it's 12 times t, the number of years. So you can see that what we have is we have a formula for money that is compounded n times a year. This is how you would do it 12 times a year, compounded n times a year. Would be the formula. The amount is equal to the principal. The principal is the amount you start with, times 1 plus the interest rate divided by n to the n times t. The nice thing about this equation is it works whether you are borrowing the money or investing the money. This equation is what you follow. Let's do 2 quick examples, okay? Now, let's imagine in this problem you invest $10,000 at 4% interest compounded monthly. How much do you have after 5 years? You need to be careful to put your pieces in the right place in this formula. We want to know the amount. I know the principal is $10,000. I know the interest rate is 0.04. I know it's compounded monthly, and I know that I'm going to wait 5 years. I'm trying to figure out A. It's really important that you punch that into your calculator correctly. So you get $12,209.97. So you can see that your money grew, but not incredibly fast at 4% interest. Okay, let's ask a slightly different question. Let's say, how much money do you have to invest to have $10,000 in 5 years if you can get 12% interest compounded annually? By the way, if you can get 12% interest compounded annually, you should jump on that. That's a really good rate. Okay, so what we're going to have is we know A. We know the amount that we want to end up with. That's supposed to be $10,000. We don't know the principal. We don't know how much we have to invest now, but we do know that the rate is 12%. We know that it's going to be compounded once a year. And we know that we'd like to finish in 5 years. Now, this is a number. So this term right here, we can actually divide both sides by. So P would equal 10,000 divided by 1 plus 0.12 to the 5th power. That's something you want to be careful. You plug into your calculator. And so you get 5,674.27. That's how much you need to invest to end up with the $10,000 at the end. Hope that's helpful.